literally and figuratively. So we started tearing down this old campus, and as you can see, it was a lot to tear down. Ultimately, there were 3 buildings that came down. In the upper left corner, you can see what was pretty much the main portion of the campus. It was offices plus large classroom spaces. And then you can see at the bottom left, that's part of that building as well. And to the bottom right is part of the was another building which was strictly classrooms. And as you can see in the upper right, there is a building up there, and those used to be the dormitories. That building ended up staying because that building is in a creek setback. And if we were to tear it down, we would never be able to build there again. So we maintained this building. And as I like to say, I put a little bit of lipstick on the pig and made it a little more ADA accessible and kept it for offices. There was also another dormitory building way up the hill. So if you look at the upper left, we're looking down from the top of that hill. There was another dormitory there that was torn down and now is a parking lot. So this is, this is sort of during construction, what that building is looking like. It was starting to look like, and you can see that the architects are so good that it looks exactly like the rendering, which is absolutely amazing. So the bottom left is where the large building was, and to the right of the screen was where another building was. And in the upper left, you can see that there's the parking lot up there. That's where another building was. And we built it right around that building. And it was very interesting in the fact that we wanted the new building, the second floor of the new building, to interface with the existing building. So we had to take the land down about 2 feet, and now we have doors that exit out of the second floor that are even with that building up there. Key things that we were looking for in this project was welcome and access. We wanted a space that was extremely welcoming and not institutional feeling. As you can see in the picture here in the upper left, you see orange over there, and that's right outside the front doors. And I'll explain colors in a little bit and how we used colors to assist people with disabilities. But upper left corner, very accessible. We now have the power ADA doors that individuals can use and open the doors themselves. We didn't have that before. That building was built way before 1990. This building has all of those features that you would expect in an ADA compliant building. But one of the things that was really concerning to us was how individuals arrived to the program. So in the bottom left, you see this large turnabout now. So many of you probably don't know that vendor bus drivers come in and drop individuals off with wheelchair lifts on the vehicles. The old building, if you look at that picture and you see where the pipes are sticking out of the mid island, that's where the old building used to come all the way out to. And when the vans would come in, we could load and unload 1, maybe 2 vans for the individuals at a time. There was also not an overhang. So in inclement weather, as people are coming out of the vans, they're in the weather until they are lowered down, and then we could move them into the building. It was very important for us for efficiency's sake, to have a place where at least 5 vehicles can load and unload at any given time, not have to do a 7-point turn to get in and out. Also, to have a rolling curb, and it's actually not even a rolling curb, it's just even directly with the road, so that individuals do not trip. It's not a trip hazard, much more easily accessible, and that large overhang to keep people. So the buses themselves, the lifts, when they park up against this, the lift portion opens up down under the overhang. So when individuals exit the bus, there's very little like rain that would possibly even get on them because they are now sheltered within this. So it's a key thing to look at, you know, what are the needs of the people that you serve? And this was one of those that a lot of people looked at and said, yeah, it's not really that important. And we were saying, no, it's very important, you know. And I think it would be lovely if more public buildings had this type of entrance where people can actually be dropped off. So again, now the vehicles are able to actually turn around. You can see a lot of our ADA vans sitting there. But once you enter the building, you can see that we have large, wide open spaces. That upper center area, upper center picture shows the walk-off mat on there. So that's protection for the building, but also you have space in all of the hallways within the building that at least 2 wheelchairs can be going opposite direction, and you can have a person in the middle, a person on each side. So they're very wide and you have lots of movement and traffic. Lots of doors. You'll also see that, and I'll get into the lighting in a little bit, but you can see lots of natural light coming in. There's a lot of windows in the front area, a lot of natural light. And as you can see in the upper right, that hallway is also designed to have that movement going through. And also elevators. We did not have a need for elevators before, but what was key in this building was, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a wheelchair and pushed in a wheelchair. So David has. Have you ever been pulled in a wheelchair? Pulled backwards. It's very, you don't feel like you have a lot of control, especially when you're being pulled backwards. And what we did with these elevators is we placed them directly center in the building. So when you enter the elevator and you go up the next floor, the doors open on the opposite side. So you continue to face and go directly through. So if you are needing somebody to push your wheelchair, you're never in that position of being pulled backwards, which is very disorienting, and it also makes you feel like you're not in control. So these little things that we were thinking about to create more dignity for the people that we serve. You'll also see that we have these handrails around the building, and all of those handrails were custom made for us and in wood. We could have easily gotten the products that are made for hospitals, plastic and institutional looking, but we wanted it to be very warm and inviting. It's very important that people with disabilities don't feel like they're in a space that others them. And I'm open to questions as we go along. So if anybody has any questions.
Dan?
Yes.
I remember when you gave me a tour, which I was so grateful to hear it straight from you, and as we walked through your beautiful facility. When you were mentioning the handrails to me, you said something about how the design allowed for people's fingers to go like in between the handrail and the wall. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, so our architects designed the handrails to fit the hand, to fit the natural hand. So like many of the handrails that you'll see in the hospitals, those sort of rubbery plastic ones that they sort of mount against the wall. Yeah, you can hold on to it, but it doesn't, in our handrails, they come up a little bit like this and then they round inward. So you can actually grip the handrail, and it's a comfortable grip. We also put those in not just for people with mobility issues, but also individuals who may have low vision. So does that answer your question, Susie?
Yes, thank you so much.
Now on this slide, and I had shared this with Susie and some of you before, that there is an architect who's apparently very famous for building buildings for people with autism. and her name is Magda Mustafa. And we did all of this without looking at Magda Mustafa's stuff. And it turns out that we not only checked all of her boxes, but we also extended it beyond. Because one thing we know with people with autism is that flicker rates in monitors, flicker rates in lighting can be very, very, very distracting and very disruptive to the individuals, can cause sensory overload. We wanted to make sure that the lights here were full spectrum lighting, which is as close to natural as you possibly can, but also tunable in certain classrooms. So we can change the warmth of the lights in many of the classrooms. So you see the bottom left here, that's our upper classroom while it was being constructed. And those lights can go to a warm tone all the way to a cool tone. In addition to that, we can choose to either have the lighting come down, or we can have the lighting refracted up to the ceiling, or we can choose to do both. So it's very flexible lighting for the individuals. And in addition to that, we wanted to ensure as much natural light coming into the building as possible. This is the most comforting to people with autism who have sensory issues. So a lot of thought was put into this. And in addition to that, the architects were very mindful of shadows, ensuring that that we tried to eliminate as many shadows as possible. So if you walk through the facility, you're not going to see a lot of shadows moving around on the floor, which can also be very distracting. So this design that was put in here, actually, UC Berkeley's Autism Center is replicating and using this system in their facility. So we were sort of a pioneer in this particular area, and we're very pleased about that. Any questions on lighting? This was not included in Magda Mustafa's. Acoustics is, and it's very important to think about acoustics when you're building any kind of building for people with autism and people without. Certain rooms certainly should be designed for amplifying noise. Yet you also want to have sort of escape spaces where noise is muffled a little bit. And throughout our building, we have a product called Acoustablock that's put into the many of the walls that helps keep the noise down in that room, but also prevents that noise from moving into another room. So imagine you're in a class, and I'm sure if we all remember elementary school or even college, you could be in a classroom and then you could hear a bunch of noise from the classroom next door. Well, that's not conducive to a learning environment, especially for people with sensory deficits or excited sensory abilities. You'll see to the far right in this picture, that beige area, that's actually acoustic felt panels. We use them, and everybody walks in and says, oh, you have plenty of places to put up your artwork and so forth. And yes, we use it for that. But really the primary purpose there is an acoustic sound absorbing material. And I'm sure many of you in the accessibility space have started seeing this being incorporated into buildings. We also chose to have a carpet tiles installed that have a higher acoustic rating as well. And then we also looked at the acoustics between floors, trying to minimize that stomp, stomp, stomp that you may hear downstairs. A key part of acoustics as well is the sensory zoning. And that was what I was sort of talking about. In our building, we have like this space that you see here and our movement studio, places where it's designed to have more noise, right? But also, so it's not muting echoes. It's not necessarily removing those stimuli. Yet our classrooms, the core classrooms, you're going to find that are much more muted and much quieter spaces. That's where the core learning actually happens. We also have, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, care space or escape rooms, which is key under Magda Mustafa's her design, and that is places that people can go to get away from the sensory overload. And we have a couple of really small rooms. They don't have doors on them because we don't want to ever be accused of locking people in rooms, but they are spaces that individuals self-regulate. They go in on their own, just calm down because they're quieter spaces, the lighting is tunable, and there's activities in there, sensory activities that they can enjoy. Any questions about acoustics? What was very, and this isn't necessarily included in Magda Mustafa's as well, but care needs. We were very conscious about the needs of people with disabilities, and I really wish that more public buildings would start incorporating adult diapering or adult changing stations within them. There is a law, and I believe it's by next year, all public, 2025, yes. All public spaces that are large, such as movie theaters, arenas, etc., will have to have an adult diapering or adult changing station built into them. Any of them that are new. We have three, two of which, like this one here, have 2 adult changing stations. Now, many organizations like ours, they have adult changing facilities, but what we wanted to incorporate here was to increase dignity, to actually have that toilet and the lift available, that if they chose to use the toilet, they would have that dignity of being able to use the toilet as well. These rooms were designed because, as you can imagine, sometimes that could be a little bit messy. And we designed this so you'll see on the walls, you've got that reflection there. That's FRP, which is fiberglass reinforced plastic. It was specially designed for us. It came, I think the white came from London and the blue to the right came from Canada. How many of you are familiar with the gas stations and the bathrooms there, and they've got that plastic that goes up halfway up the wall? It's the same concept. It's the same stuff, but this stuff is much more dignified. It doesn't have that texture, not institutional. This makes for easy cleaning and easy sanitation. And you can see in the one picture down at the bottom, there is a drain there. That's because if you look to the left, and I didn't get a good picture of it, but there's shower facilities there that we can actually wash off, help the individual to clean themselves, but also wash off the wheelchair and so forth. So we went above and beyond in this particular space. We also thought about the restrooms. And each of what we wanted was to improve dignity. And there is, the law says that you have to label men's restrooms and women's restrooms. But we're working with people with developmental disabilities who may not necessarily know the difference. In addition to that, the population that we serve can change. One day it could be 50-50, the next day it could be 70-30. And then you're going to have restrooms that are hardly being used and restrooms that are constantly being used. We got an exception, and each of the restrooms are, they are gender neutral, all restrooms. They're all single use for dignity, and they're all ADA accessible. In addition to that, we thought, well, how are we going to maintain sanitation? Everything in the restrooms is, what am I trying to think of? Automatic, so no touch, and you have that FRP in there, so it makes it cleaning and sanitizing these restrooms very easy. In addition to that, you'll see in the left-hand side, the toilets, we removed the tanks, So we didn't want toilets with tanks, and we wanted them up and off the floor. So it's easy to clean underneath them, and makes maintenance a lot easier, and it just keeps the bathroom much more sanitized. Transitional cues. And this is where I get to talk a little bit about color. For people with autism, it's good to give people things that they can actually, that maybe aren't necessarily in your face, but after you're in a facility, after a while, you start realizing, oh, that's what this means. And you'll see the green here. We chose green to represent all of our classrooms. So anytime that you see green within our facility, it is associated with a classroom space. Anytime you see yellow, it's a public space. So you see yellow up in the upper left, and that door that's open, that door is actually our conference area. So it's more of a public space. It's a place where people from the public are going to use. But you'll also see down at the bottom, the carpet changes color. And that's a subliminal cue that says, I'm moving from a more public space, this hallway area, into classrooms. So all the classrooms have that lighter gray, and that bluer gray is in all of the public areas. I know for a lot of people, it doesn't make a difference to them, but when you're talking about people with disabilities and people with sensory or who may not necessarily be able to read signs, this becomes great cues that tell you this is what this type of space is for versus what this type of space is for. The lighting is also used as cues. So all hallways have down lighting on the sides of the rooms. All classrooms have the bar lighting through them, and then all of the public spaces will have that hanging square type lighting, and as well as the offices. So you sort of get a feel that, you know, each of these types of areas have very specific things about them. So you sort of start associating those. We also use orange as our welcome. So if you remember, on the outside of the building, the two sides that welcome you into the building are orange. And then we also have orange going up our staircase that welcomes you up to the second floor. Also, you've probably seen blue throughout. Blue is always going to be associated with water. So outside of each of our restrooms, we utilize blue. So there's blue painting outside, and then above each sink is blue FRP. So anytime that you see blue, that's water. So you'll see it around the drinking fountains. So it's an easy thing for people to realize and to associate. Escape spaces. So this is one of those escape spaces that I was talking about. It's a small little room, not a lot in here in this picture, but soft cushion, relaxing space. You can see that the lighting in here is moved to a warmer tone, but it is tunable. If the individual would prefer a cooler tone, they can change that on their own. And it has a ton of Acoustablock within these walls. So if you are actually here and you walk from outside that room and then into the room, you can actually hear your voice feeling more muffled. So it's a really great space. And we have several individuals who are on the spectrum that use this on a daily basis, and they know that when they are becoming overstimulated, they will walk into it to get a little bit of respite from the noise that's happening outside. Safety is very concerning for us as well. So as you saw there, a lot of furnishings are specialized. They have round, soft, and so forth. We also ensured that we have alarms and alarm access, limiting alarm access for individuals because many of them will like to actually pull the pull stations and set those off. But we also set up door locks that in the event of an emergency, we're able to lock things down very quickly. We all hate thinking about it, but as many of you know, SB 553 went through, Senate Bill 553 went through, that requires all workspaces to have a workplace violence prevention program. And we have implemented here a emergency notification system and are able to lock down the facility quickly in case of something like an active shooter, God forbid, but any of those things. The building was also built with hardened materials. So all of the rooms and everything, at least 4 feet up, is a much denser board than you would use probably in any other commercial building. And that's because many of the individuals that we serve may, especially with wheelchairs, are going to run up against it, may have behavioral concerns and punch holes through. We've been in this building now for 2 years and we have not had a single hole yet. So, yay. So that was a good investment. We also are finishing up and installing a gate that is going to protect the facility. And as you can see in this building, you look to the right, and that is a supervisor's office. And you can see that there's windows all the way around that supervisor's office. And if you really look close, you can see through the front window of the supervisor's office, and then there's a window that looks directly into the classroom. This was designed on purpose, not to spy on our staff or spy on participants, but rather to provide immediate support in case an emergency did happen, or to provide support to the staff in handling a behavior, and etc. Also, in regards to safety, our HVAC system brings in fresh air, rotates it constantly, where each room has a full cycle, newly fresh air every 20 minutes. And we designed that. Obviously, our design was back in 2018, 2019, and then COVID hit. And then I was like, well, what are we going to do about that? And my architect came back and said, don't worry about it. It's built in. So we get that fresh air system. I will say it hasn't prevented outbreaks, but it's probably minimized those outbreaks that we've had. We have specialized spaces throughout the building. And on the left here, you see we have a movement studio with the mirrors on the wall and so forth. And this is really great. Individuals really enjoy doing yoga here. We also designed this space as one that the public can use. So let's say you're a yoga instructor and you want to utilize a space to teach yoga. You'll see that there's an exit door there, but that's also a separate entrance door. We also designed bathrooms to be close to each of these public spaces so they can be divvied up and utilized without disrupting the rest of the day program. And then on the right here, you can see our art studio. And it's absolutely amazing. You've got to come and visit it when the folks are in there. They're producing amazing artwork. Because of the paints and so forth, we used a 4-bow flooring in here, a hard surface flooring that's very rugged, easily cleanable. Got to keep all of those things in mind when we're doing this. And key here is also our outdoor space. When we were looking at this, we wanted to make sure that the outdoor spaces weren't just outdoor spaces. And you see these 2 half-moon circled rounds here. Those are directly outside of classrooms. So we saw the outdoor space as an extension of the classroom, another place that classes can take place. The benches were specifically designed, especially designed for us. I love them. I love them to pieces. And you'll also see the green along the wall there. That green was, again, associated with the classrooms. So those are all classrooms there. But also the greens were picked out of the trees to replicate the natural environment. And the grays here, if you look at the grays on the right on the building and look over to the oak trees to the left, the grays match the oak trees. So trying to build into nature as much as possible. Again, bringing these natural colors, which are less stimulating to the people that we serve. And I know I'm running out of time, but I do want to talk about the importance of really good partners. These are architects from Studio Urbis. Both Tom Chastain and Renee Chow are residents here in Lafayette, and they are absolutely amazing. Tom is a lecturer at UC Berkeley, as well as a principal of Studio Urbis, and Renee is actually the dean of the Architecture and Urban Design School at UC Berkeley. What I absolutely love about them, and I think what's really key when you are building this, and Susie, I'm sure you know this, it's to listen. When Tom and Renee were chosen for this, they weren't chosen for their expertise in ADA design. They were chosen for their listening skills, because as they listened, they would go and research and come back to us and say, have you thought about this? They would also listen. They did interviews with me, the board of directors, all of our direct care staff, the managers, the directors, looking at everybody's needs and trying to incorporate that into the building. Yes, you can't meet everybody's needs to a T, but boy, did they do a really good job of really making sure that the people that we serve, number one, were prioritized, and looking at things beyond just ADA. Like I said, the lighting is beyond ADA. Some of the acoustics that we have the acoustics are beyond ADA. I love these people to death. They are just absolutely amazing partners, and I would highly recommend them to anybody. Yeah, it's key to have really good architects, because they're the ones that are going to make sure that the contractor is getting it done correctly and meeting all of your needs. And that pretty much wraps up my presentation. However, I know that Ava mentioned signage, and I didn't get into that on this, but it's very key in the ADA space to have the appropriate signage. So all of our classroom spaces do have the Braille in them. And then in addition to that, we have special signage in the large rooms and so forth, because we do have to have assistive listening devices in those rooms. So Ava, you know about those particular signs. But what we also wanted to make sure was that signage was durable, because we are working with people with developmental disabilities, and they will be using these signs much more than the general public would. And I think, going back to our architects, as Tom would say, this isn't about universal design. This is just good design. What is built for people with disabilities benefits everybody. Yes, you can build a fully ADA building, but if you're not thinking about the lighting, and it has a flicker rate, we're all bothered by that. But because of people with autism, we made sure that it didn't happen. And boy, isn't that beneficial for everybody. And a lot of the accommodations that are in buildings now for people with disabilities have benefited everybody. As we age, the ramps, the height of fixtures, the signage that is around the campus, all of it is important overall. And you can stick with basic ADA, but really start thinking outside the box of what are the needs of specific groups of people, and trying to incorporate that. ADA is going to tell you, yes, this has to be this high, this has to be done a certain way, and so forth, but they don't necessarily tell you about your lighting. They don't necessarily tell you about your acoustics. They don't necessarily tell you about texture. They don't tell you about, and that was one of the things that we wanted to incorporate as well, and that's why we have the felt on the wall, is different textures throughout the rooms. Smooth, rough, cushy versus hard, because for people with autism, those stimulating those senses is sometimes important, but also removing those from is also important. So I'm open to any questions at this point.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. That was extremely informative. And I really appreciate your time and joining us and sharing about the amazing elements at Las Trampas. You know, your programs as well as the beautiful space. And I would highly recommend everyone in this group, if you have not visited Las Trampas since their remodel, that you make your way up there. We did have a group who was able to go from this committee back in February. It's Valentine's Day. I was double checking my dates there. I thought I remembered it. But I know some folks weren't able to join us that day. So I do highly recommend you go, because as great as the pictures are that Dan shared, it does not do justice to the absolutely gorgeous elements and the way that they come together, and really experiencing what all of those elements that Dan was talking about, like things that have a certain color identify a certain space, and the different soft elements and signage and all of the things that went into the creation of such a gorgeous and accessible space. It really feels like the gold standard compared to what I have visited in other places. So
I
kudos.
appreciate that, Susie. I really appreciate that. And you know what? You brought up something that reminded me too, is you said about the space. It was also very important for us for it not to, and I've said it a couple of times, but if you walk into this space, and the participants weren't here and you didn't know what we were doing, you wouldn't think that it was designed to be a place for people with developmental disabilities. It just feels nice, you know? And people with disabilities deserve that. They deserve the best. And that's what we sort of designed this for, was to be a model for what services could look like and what facilities could look like. As I said, some of what we're doing, I have a friend of mine who's replicating and I didn't even get to talk about our teaching kitchen, replicating our teaching kitchen, which is fully ADA accessible. And UC Berkeley is using our lighting system. So, I mean, there's just like, you know, if we could have more spaces that look like this, we would be great. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Susie, but
No, not at all.
I could talk forever.
I'm sure, and I wish we had time to continue the conversation, but I really appreciate how robust your presentation was. And again, I really encourage folks to go on up, take a field trip, and visit. Dan was super welcoming, as was Jason, the gentleman on his team who initially met with me. And yeah, I definitely second what you're saying, Dan. I think if you walked in and the space was empty, I would probably think it was like a satellite office of Google, or, you know, some modern, not workspace in an institutional sense, but a place where people come together to meet and share ideas and interact and, you know, have community together. And I think you really hit it out of the park with the way that it came together.
Well, I don't know if we're on par with Google's style, but you know, certainly it's a very lovely and welcoming space. And one of the things we pride ourselves on is joy. And if you walk into this space, especially with the people that we serve, it's just joyful. And I've been at plenty of day programs, especially hours before we did this, where it was pretty depressing when you walked in. And now we've got a really great place. So thank you all for joining me on this little tour. And just reach out to me. I can put in the chat my phone number, and anybody who would like to do a tour, I'm happy to give them. Let me see.
Okay, and I will also be sending a follow-up. I do a little summary of our notes, and I always include contact info for our presenters, so I will be sure to do that.
Then I'm not putting it in chat. Susie's taking care of it for me.
Yeah. So you can reach out to Dan over email or phone, and definitely encourage you to get up there if you can.
And for those of you who've been here, good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And our next meeting will be on September 11th. We always do the second Wednesday of the month from 3 to 4. So hopefully you can join us then. And thanks again, Dan, so much for your time.
Take care, all.
Have a great day, everyone.
See ya.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye.